Hi, Tom. Welcome to the podcast. How did they get there?
Thanks, Nishant.
Uh, would you quickly introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure, my name is Tom Cheesewright. I'm an applied futurist. And what that means is I work with organizations around the world to answer three questions. What does our future look like? How do we tell that story to our colleagues and our customers and sometimes our shareholders? And then the big question, what on earth do we do about it?
Great. That sounds very fascinating, and something I've not come across anybody else doing before. Do you love what you do?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so this is a made-up job. I mean, that's why you haven't come across any others. There are lots of futurists and futurologists out there, but this specific brand where I focus primarily on the near future, where I work across different industries from automotive to government to healthcare to pharmaceuticals, and when I get involved in answers as well as questions, that's really, I don't know if it's unique to me, but certainly that's unusual. And so I sat down with a friend of mine 8 years ago and I jumped ship from my last startup and told him what I wanted to do. And he came up with the term applied futurist for what I do. And so, yeah, I love it. It would be daft to make up your own job and not enjoy it.
Absolutely. Though I think every job is made up anyway, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, you're working across sectors, and I was looking through your website and you were looking at future in food, to future in his business, to future in work, to future in cities, basically future in everything. So how do you, work across so many domains?
So I guess there's two parts to that answer. I mean, the first part is it's really mercenary in that I go where the money is. People come to me and say, could you, look at the future of X for us? And generally I say yes, because it sounds interesting. And then, I'm extremely curious. But it took me the first 2 years of doing this, maybe 3 years of doing this to answer that question, which is, you need a toolkit. Like in any job, you need a set of tools to do the job. And there were lots of tools out there. Future studies is a really established discipline, but I didn't find that any of the tools that were out there answered the specific questions my clients were asking. Because most of my clients are primarily focused on the near future. Not always, but certainly when I'm working behind closed doors with people, it's about what's going to take me out at the knees next, not what might happen in 30 years. And so the first 2-3 years I was doing this, and it's been refined ever since. I built my own set of tools, and that's what allows me to jump into different markets, take that toolkit and apply it to that particular industry and extract some interesting ideas or results.
Oh, that's great. I think that makes sense. That toolkit approach is something I've come across myself, because driving Industry 4 strategy in an organization, and it's while there's really good tools out there, you always have to tailor something specific to your need if you want to scale stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So nobody knows this better than you. The industry is changing at a dramatic pace, right? And you've highlighted that across your books, your podcast, right, with engagements that you do. What do you have to do to keep learning and adapting to this?
It's a good question. I mean, you do train your brain to get good at learning, and that's one of the most critical things. And it's something I end up advising a lot of people to do, is particularly people I work with, they tend to be more senior in their careers. They tend to have been in a particular industry for maybe 20, 30 years. And you never stop learning, but you do sort of forget how little you know. You start to think you know everything, and it's subconscious, and I'm not criticizing people for it. And occasionally you have to remind yourself that actually there's lots of things you don't know. And so one of the things I did for myself a few years ago to really kind of reawaken those learning muscles, and something I advise a lot of my clients do, is to get a new hobby. Because it puts you into a world where everybody knows more than you do, where you're suddenly forced to learn from the ground up again. And you're actually communicating with a whole new bunch of people. So it's incredibly humbling. It kickstarts all those learning muscles, and it teaches you to experiment and fail and test stuff. So for me, I actually went to learn to roller skate at the age of 39. With my kids, where there were 6-year-olds around me who were much better than I was, and it was really good for me. Apart from keeping me a little bit fit, it really did reawaken those learning processes.
That is great, and I absolutely agree with that. It's something I try to practice on myself. I mean, my background is automotive engineering, but I got into software, then self-taught myself outside of my job to do web programming, to now ML and AI programming. And I don't like to call myself a professional in any of those, but I do enough to convert my own ideas into a prototype, which is all I want to be able to do, really.
So there's a really interesting thing I learned the other day. You've heard the phrase "a jack of all trades."
Yeah.
Yeah, jack of all trades and master of none. It's often used as a criticism of people.
Exactly.
And actually, the original phrase was jack of all trades, but master of none is sometimes better than a master of one. And, you know, it really is, I think it's such a skill set for our age, being able to dip into lots of different things and understand the connections between them.
Yeah, no, I think it's that's absolutely true. Especially, I mean, this has come across on some of my previous episodes. We talk about this book by David Epstein called Range. You probably have that. Exactly.
That one.
Exactly. So, it comes up on here. He mentions about, being a generalist, not a specialist. And most times you need to be a generalist in the business to be able to drive the change.
And I think particularly having that balance of arts and science skill sets.
Yeah.
You know, having that, because I think, the science is a creative subject, but actually the creative skills are really well taught in arts subjects.
Yeah.
And so having that blend of the two is really valuable.
And I think the other point which I've seen in my time across industry is the collaboration is so important, right, between arts and science and, across industries, because actual innovation comes from that, not just trying to do everything on your own.
Absolutely. Hugely. I mean, look at the biggest brands today.
Yeah.
Look at someone like, if Apple isn't a collaboration between art and science, I don't know what is.
Exactly. So, the skills required for future jobs are going to be very different, right? And you see this changing constantly. There are job titles now which didn't exist. I mean, my own job title didn't exist a couple of years back. And would you recommend companies to grow these skills in-house or to hire for them?
Grow for really, really simple reasons. There aren't the people to hire. I mean, the people you are going to want in 5 years' time don't exist. And even if the universities and the schools are putting out some of them, they're not putting out enough.
Yeah.
I frequently have conversations with organizations where they complain about particularly the cost of some of the technical skills they have to hire.
Yeah.
And so I ask them, I say, well, how many people are you training? And they say, none. I'm like, why? We need to invest an awful lot more in developing people. And I think it is it's an increasingly critical business expense. If you want to build sustainable success, if you want to have the workforce that's going to get you ready for the future, you need to be training them, not expecting them to just appear from nowhere.
Absolutely agree. And across all of these themes that we've been discussing at the moment, a common one that I have come across is the culture within the business. What do you think is the importance of culture when business is transforming or to be future ready?
So for me, one of my big criticisms of organizations is when they try and have a culture, a single culture, when actually the culture you want in a software development team may not be the right culture for a marketing team, may not be the right culture for a logistics team. And so, I think companies are often kind of too prescriptive on culture, whereas you need a set of shared values. You need to have absolutely a set of shared values across both the company and the partners you choose to work with, and ideally with your customers as well. But actually, once you get down to the sort of the minutiae of culture, you really ought to let it actually be less controlling and allow each different unit in the organization to have the culture that allows it to optimize its own productivity, performance, success. And so that for me is, culture is hugely important, but we shouldn't try and create good cultures by being prescriptive. We should delegate that control as close to the edge of the organization as possible.
Yeah, empowering people. Great. So moving to the second part of our interview, is there any one book, or a couple of books that you've given most as a gift, or had the most impact on you?
So the book that's had the most impact on me, again, I have it right here, It's the Usborne Book of the Future from like 1979, I think it was first published.
Okay.
And so my mum bought me this in a book fair in Ealing in London, where we lived at the time, in about 1981, something like that. And it's been with me ever since. You can tell it's a bit battered. It's falling apart. But it's subtitled "A Trip in Time to the Year 2000 and Beyond." And it wasn't the only thing that got me obsessed with the future, and particularly with the scientific aspects of the future. But it really helped to sort of crystallize my imagination and enthuse me about the possibilities. And you combine that with growing up in an age of Star Wars and Star Trek and Buck Rogers and Battlestar Galactica, and all the Jerry Anderson stuff. I was just steeped in science fiction from an early age, and it really has set me on that long path to here.
Great. So, everything that you do, especially in the future, and we mentioned a little bit about it, was allowing to fail, right? So do you have a specific failure of yours which has later led to your success, or a favorite failure of yours?
Crikey, pick one. The one that's probably had the most impact on my career was a business I started in 2006 called Eggheads. And the idea was going to be home technology support. So it was going to be a franchise. I was going to franchise it out to people. So I paid lots of money for the branding, the website, and the ideas, and all the sales and marketing collateral. Yeah. And it was for people who'd come around to your house and help you to choose, buy, and use modern technology. Mm-hmm. But the problem was, what it needed to work was people who are really good at talking to people and people who are really good at talking to machines, and they had to be the same person. Mm-hmm. So that if somebody knocked on your door, you'd let them in because they were nice people, but they could also fix the problem. And what I realized quite quickly was that anybody who can talk to machines and can talk to people is already earning about 70 grand a year and really doesn't need a business on the side or a franchise. But I ran this business for about 18 months. And what I did, thanks to my wife working at a radio station, all my first clients were radio DJs. Yeah. And I went around to fix one of them's computer, Sam Walker. And she said afterwards, "Oh, you're quite good at explaining this stuff. I've got a new show on BBC Radio Manchester. Would you like to come on and answer people's tech questions?" Yeah. So this was like a late night show on a Sunday night, and I said, sure. I went and did it for months and months and months. And then started doing some of the other local radio shows, then bits of national radio. And then the BBC moved to Salford, close to where I live now. Yeah. And suddenly I was on the BBC Breakfast sofa. I was on BBC News. I had a regular slot on 5 Live. I was on Radio 4. And I've done about, I don't know now, well over 2,000 broadcast interviews since that chance meeting with Sam, where she asked me to fix her computer and come on her radio show. All thanks to that failed business. So yeah, that's a favourite failure. Nice.
Do you have an unusual habit or an absolute thing that you love?
I don't know. I mean, the roller skating is pretty unusual. I don't know many men in their 40s who learn to roller skate, so that kind of stands out. I guess the other thing is I'm a big napper. Like, if I can, I will take an extra sleep. And I think we live in a very, very busy age, and I'm very protective of my time. I try to only work in the mornings and relax more in the afternoons. And quite often that means just toddling off back to bed for half an hour just to go and catch up. And I highly recommend it to anybody. I wrote a blog post about it a few years ago called the two mornings experiment, where I'm really good in the morning. So I wondered, if I had a nap, could I have another morning basically in the afternoon? And absolutely, some days it works.
Nice. I think I recently read the book Why We Sleep. That has some really good advice in terms of why napping is important.
If you need it, take it.
Exactly. Do you have any learnings that you still carry from university or school?
Yeah, I have such a terrible memory. I kind of struggle to remember where I picked things up. But one of the things I learned at school, and it took me a while to get to grips with this, is I was always a bit of a performer. Mm. So I did dance classes from when I was 6 to 16. I used to get involved in all the theatre shows and things. And it was only really in the last 5 years I've admitted to myself how much that's really important to me, how much actually I really like performing. And so particularly during lockdown, I've really missed it. I've really missed being on stage, even though I'm speaking now rather than acting. I've really missed that. And so, I think that's I guess it took me a long time to learn the lesson, but school kind of exposed me to the possibility. But yeah, I think we should be honest with ourselves about what's important to us.
Yeah.
And definitely, I think I've learned. It's very hard for a Brit to accept it, but I like show.
No, I mean that's great. And I think I think those everybody has those individual learnings that you don't realize where you picked them up for, but when you look back in retrospective, you realize, oh, actually, yeah, that's where it comes from. You've been across various industries and talking about future. I'm sure you've come across various stereotypes in these industries. Is there any specific stereotype that you hear in your domains? Really?
I mean, loads is the honest answer. I mean, it's quite funny how many industries stereotype themselves.
Yeah.
So, the property industry, particularly the construction industry, they stereotype themselves as being very backward, very conservative, very slow. And they kind of are. I mean, but it is changing.
Yeah.
But there also are some stereotypes that are kind of true.
Mm-hmm.
The property industry is seen as being very white, very public school, very, very male. And sadly, although again that is changing, and some organisations like British Land are making huge strides in changing this, you can still go to an event with the property industry and the room will be 100% white, 100% male, and mostly sort of upper middle class. Quite a lot of public school educated people. So, yeah, there are really some very strong stereotypes in different industries. That said, there are some that completely blow your expectations out of the water. Banking is a great example of that. Large swathes of banking I found, are the sort of the stereotype of the banker really not to be true at all.
Yeah. Great. You were doing so many different things and, always trying to keep on top of what's changing, what's new. Do you ever get overwhelmed or unfocused? And if you do, what do you do to bring your focus back in?
Totally. I mean, I absolutely do. And, it happened to me not that long ago. After the launch of my last book, Future Proof Your Business, I was doing sort of, daily Zoom promotional calls while trying to do some sort of client research as well. And I was just completely flattened. I'm feeling a little bit like that now, to be honest. I'm looking forward to Christmas. And the only thing you can do is to forgive yourself, to, actually say, look, you can't do this. So don't do this. Stop. Walk away, take a breath, because you're not helping anybody if you carry on, least of all yourself and your family. And so, this is partly why I'm so careful with my time. What I do is a very creative job.
Yeah.
It requires the expenditure of an enormous amount of what limited brain power I have. So I'm always reading, learning, digesting, analyzing, and then writing or speaking about it. If I go and do a big speaking gig and I'm up on stage for an hour, 90 minutes on a Wednesday morning, I've learned that I pretty much have to write the rest of that day off, because I'm, apart from maybe some meetings and a bit of lunch, I'm not really going to get anything else done. And it took me a long time to come to terms with that. I think we have we hold ourselves to such ridiculously high standards when it comes to working hours, particularly, and being there and present. It's like, if you can't work well, don't work. Give yourself, go and have a sleep, go and have some food, go and have a walk away, take a week off if you need to, walk away and come back to it with a fresh head. And generally what I find is problems that might have taken me 4 hours to solve when I was tired take me 15 minutes to solve with a fresh head. It's just not worth anybody's time forcing yourself to do those things.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And it's one of those harder things to convince yourself that actually you've got this big to-do list, but you only should attempt those top 2 or top 3 items.
Yeah. Do them well, walk away.
Exactly. So, knowing what you know today, what would you instruct your younger self?
It's kind of hard, because I don't think I would change very much. I'm in that very, very lucky position. I think I would probably tell myself just to keep going, just to pursue your curiosity. You know, that it all works out, you know. I mean, I'm very lucky, you know. I've led a very privileged life. You know, I don't come from super money or anything. I didn't go to a posh school or anything, but you know, I've always had a really supportive environment. You know, never really wanted for much, and you know, I feel like that's given me the opportunity to experiment and play and try new things, particularly with the support of my wife as well, actually, who's allowed me to go and try all these silly ideas for businesses and supported me along the way. So, you know, I think it would be a very, very reassuring conversation just to say, just keep going.
Nice. I think that could be the title of your next book, Pursue Your Curiosity.
Yeah, totally.
So, you know, in the current COVID times, we see that, you know, students are graduating from college, you know, experienced professionals are, you know, being put on furlough, letting go. So they're looking to pivot careers. What would be your advice, firstly to the graduate and then to the experienced person, for, you know, any of the domains that you work across?
Yeah, I think the advice is actually quite similar for both of them. And it is, look, we're about to see a big bump in self-employment.
Yeah.
You know, self-employment's gone up 50% in the last 20 years in the UK. It went up 10% after the last recession. It's probably going to go up 10% after this recession as well. To the point where I can see a day when, you know, 30+% of the UK population are self-employed, if not, you know, pushing towards 50%. And so, you know, the chances are you could hunt around for a job today, but you might be better off getting yourself prepared for a world where you're self-employed one way or another.
Yeah.
And so I think it's, you know, if you're struggling to find a new role now, it might be time to try and make one. And it's not easy.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying it's easy, but you know, there is capital around out there at the moment to fund things. That it's easier than ever to start a new business. I mean, when I started my business, it took 6 weeks just to get a bank account. You know, I used to have to do my accounts on a spreadsheet. There was no, you know, cloud-based accounting software that takes all the pain out of it. You know, you can register a company online for £13. You know, there's so many opportunities out there, and you particularly for young people and graduates, actually, they probably understand their peers better than anybody trying to sell to them does. So, you know, take advantage of that, and you know, within your means, you know, experiment a bit and try something out.
Great. So, you know, we've discussed about how you got to this position, right? Where do you want to get to from here?
That's a good question. You know, I don't want to do anything different now. You know, I've always bounced from, you know, I started my own business. I did a degree in mechatronic engineering, then did 5 years in marketing for tech firms, then did some consulting, then set up Eggheads, then set up a digital agency and sort of built websites and campaigns for people like Manchester United and Iceland, the supermarket. Then set up a software company, then did this. And it's always, you know, I always thought that I'd just keep leaping from startup to startup. But I love what I do now. And it gives me such a great balance of time working and time with my kids that I can't see me doing anything different. The big challenge, I guess, is to be top of your game. You know, I've got a level of profile and respect in the UK and increasingly in Europe. And, you know, it's about, I think, making that global. If I was going to be honest about my ambition, I want to be the #1 futurist in the world. You know, that's if I was going to be completely frank about it, that's what I'm facing.
Well, that's a good goal to have.
So, you know, most of my competitors, my nearest competitors, are a bit older than me. I may not look it, but I'm relatively young for a futurist. There are younger ones than me, sadly, as well. But and so, you know, I think if I can be in that #1 position in the next few years, then I'd be very, very happy indeed.
Great. So, Tom, thanks for, you know, being on the show and, you know, sharing your insights and stories. So before we finish, is there any last words you want to share?
No, I mean, only the obvious plug to people to go to tomcheesewright.com and sign up for my newsletter or my podcast.
Yeah, and I'll add those details in the episode description as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nishant.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Hey, listeners. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Would love to hear your feedback in the comments section. And if you enjoyed it, please subscribe.